All right, welcome back. This is the Arise News Channel, and this is This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. We now go to Niger Republic, where the ruling junta on Friday issued a 2-day ultimatum to the French ambassador to leave the country. The expulsion of Sylvain Ite partly owed to his refusal to respond to invitation to a meeting with Niger's foreign minister. Niger's foreign ministry said the past actions by the French government have become unfriendly, and France is calling for a restatement of the deposed President Mohamed Bazoum. Meanwhile, hundreds of supporters of the military change of government there have held a protest in front of the French military base in Niger's capital, Niamey. They were demanding that the troops be withdrawn within a space of 1 week.
It's all part of the general mobilization we have here. It's to demand the departure of these invading forces, this occupying force, the French force here at Niamey Air Base. That's why we wanted to come to the door of this base to ask them to leave our country from here. We don't need this occupying force. We don't want them on our land. We thank them, but we don't intend to go home. Hence the purpose of this demonstration. We're ready to give our lives for our country. We'll give them until the deadline in 10 days. The day the deadline passes, we'll penetrate their base. It's true that there will be deaths, but the most important thing for us is that they leave. Our country is more important than our lives. So we're ready to sell our lives for that country. President Macron, we're here to call on him to listen to reason while there's still time. Because beyond the prescribed deadline, have you seen the young people of Niger who have come out? You haven't seen anything yet. Because today, it's just the beginning. Between now and the end of the deadline, we're going to give them an ultimatum. And we're going to keep our young people on maximum alert so that when the deadline is up, this is our land. It's land for the people of Niger, not for France. We're going to return to the base, reclaim our land, and drive the French army out of our country. There's no question about that. We are determined, we are ready for our country, we're ready to give our lives. Niger youth are fully mobilized.
And those were Nigerians who believe that their country will be better off without any further involvement by France in the internal affairs of the country. However, joining us now to try to make sense of all, especially as regards the one too many flip-flops of ECOWAS and whether or not President Bola Tinubu is getting the right counsel on it, and the way and manner of African Union's suspension of Niger's republic, we're now being joined by Ambassador Jibrin Chinade, a former permanent secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and one-time Nigerian ambassador to Moscow and The Hague. Good to have you on This Day Live, sir. It's a pleasure to talk to you this evening. So I would like you to make sense of what is happening in Niger for us. Okay, good evening, sir.
Thank you very much, Rufai.
Thank you so much.
I was really moved by the clips we saw coming from Niger Republic. This is really a challenging moment for Africa, for ECOWAS, and indeed for Nigeria. This a time when the coalition of African leadership, Nigerian leadership, and Nigerian leadership is all called upon to a challenge. I just hope and pray that during our discussion, we will be able to explore the possibilities, the options, and possibly some of the solutions to these challenges.
Thank you so much, and I'd love to have that very deep and in-depth conversation with you. Let's go back to when this started.
Thank you.
It started a couple of weeks ago, and the conundrum has continued. Some have argued that probably ECOWAS should not have said there's a possibility of force, that it should be negotiation. Some have also argued that it's good that we keep that force option on one side of it. What do you think with the historical antecedents of Niger?
I think the history of Niger, of course, Niger has gone through a lot of military challenges. They have virtually almost 9 coups and attempted coups. Africa has also gone through the same experience of military coups. The challenge now is for ECOWAS to see whether they can stabilize the development of democracy in West Africa in particular, and AU in Africa in general. In the last few weeks, there has been a lot of challenges on both sides. The coup has actually happened on the 26th of July. The President Bazoum has been removed or he's in detention, and ECOWAS has come up with a clear position that they would not accept any further military coup in West Africa. Currently, our President Bola Tinubu is the chairman of ECOWAS. He has come up with a statement supported by his colleagues on the West African region that coup in Niger would be unacceptable. So the challenge is to find a solution, how we could resolve the coup which has actually happened and the position of ECOWAS leadership, which was unacceptable. I think this is really where the leadership of ECOWAS and the current leaders in Niamey or Niger should really establish a channel of communication or a channel of diplomatic discussions to resolve the issue. Certainly, one way or the other, there must be a solution. Our main prayers is that the solution will be peaceful, amicable, and acceptable to the people of Niger as well as to the leadership of ECOWAS.
Okay,
this
sir.
is not easy to find.
Okay, sir. So there's been a lot of false starts as regards to
Yes.
solutions. At first, it took us time to be able to talk to the Nigerians in the first place. We had to put in our religious leaders going in there to broker something before we finally got a conversation going on. Then, the terms have been laid out clear. There have been conversations. But all we hear is a timeline for 3 years. Is that tenable, knowing fully when the antecedents in other countries like Mali, that most of these school leaders just give a timeline and they don't keep to it? What do you say about that, sir?
I entirely agree with you that once you have established a communication, the ulamas or the malams have gone to Niger. The former emir of Kano was there also, and they have eventually agreed to talk. Now is the time for the ECOWAS leadership to really establish effective channel of communication. The ulamas have their own limitation. First of all, there are too many. There are, I think, about 30 people. 30 people really can hardly conduct a diplomatic or a technical political negotiations. Secondly, the current leadership in Niger have mentioned 3 years with possibly like a starting point, like a negotiating position. It's not a final thing. So there could be some sort of way that the ECOWAS leadership should now bring in more professional diplomatic communication. They have a lot of channels. They have the challenge in Niger is not only for ECOWAS. We have the challenges of other powers coming into Africa. We have the Chinese interested in Africa. We have the Russians coming in. Of course, the French have already been established over there. So ECOWAS have to take into account all these forces working in the interest, in their own interest in Niger to find a solution. But I think the best approach for ECOWAS now is to establish a strong diplomatic communication rather than the ulamas. The ulamas are doing very well by establishing a channel of communication. But the diplomatic channel, the technical thing of negotiations now would have to be taken over by some sort of recognized political leadership on both sides. So let us use our context. We have a lot of context with Niger. It's part of us in West Africa. It's part of us culturally, religiously, and in terms of economic. So let's use our economic force. Let's use our cultural force. Let's use our communication in addition to what the ulamas could do. But it's now high time to raise the level of negotiation to a more technical level. That's all my advice to ECOWAS leaders, to current chairman of ECOWAS, as well as to the other side in Niger. It's more than just a personal initiative. It's gone beyond that. We're talking of peace and war. Now it's time to initiate a much higher level of political negotiations.
What's your take on the AU suspension of Niger? Do you think it will push them, to come to the table and negotiate?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And the negotiations have not been forthcoming, or the Nigerians have not been forthcoming in the negotiations because they've been making a lot of claims before we finally had this 3-year timeline, to be able to constitute a new government.
Exactly.
So how are we so sure
exactly
that anybody ECOWAS pushes in now will be able to get results?
No, the AU has a limited influence on Niger in the sense that there is no economic leverage on them. AU has no economic leverage, has no military leverage, has very limited political leverage. The important thing is, one, is sanctions could really bring about a change of opinion. If the economy in Nigeria starts to crumble or the standard of living starts to go down, people will really ask for what is the solution. The solution is within the sitting government. The government will come under pressure itself to find a solution. There are now over 100 trucks, trailers on the borders to bring in humanitarian relief. They couldn't do that. So suddenly hunger will start to come in. Insecurity will prevail, and some sort of element of pressure will come onto the military leadership to also realize that their responsibility is not only staging a coup, their responsibility is looking after the welfare of their people. On the ECOWAS side, we also have to realize that our relationship with Niger is a long-term, permanent relationship. They are our neighbors. So we have to build a situation where we can diplomatically, politically, and economically bring them to the table to find a common solution. It's not a one-sided affair. It's a mutually acceptable solution to both sides.
Okay. Mutually acceptable solutions to both sides. When there's this double speak about Bazoum. It was just only recently we're all allowed to see Bazoum, and there was a meeting with Bazoum when General Abdul Salami went in there.
Yes.
I mean, what should we be saying to be able to get Bazoum out of his situation now? What should we be saying to the Nigerians?
I think we can't get him out of the solution because that's their last card. The military are holding him as their last card. He is really part of the negotiation challenges. You can't find a solution to the crisis without a solution. You can't find a solution to Bazoum's detention without a political solution. So it's really all encompassed on finding a political solution. I still believe that the ultimate solution is a continuous pressure from all sides. Niger is a landlocked country. Niger is 80% desert. Niger is only a population of 25 million people. Niger has very close connections with all the West African regions, Mali, Guinea. I served in Guinea very well. I know them. I've been to Niger many times, not only as a personal visit, but even as a political assignment on behalf of the Nigerian government. We have friends across there. So I believe that once we realize the solution has to come peacefully resolved through diplomatic communication with added pressure of sanctions, diplomatic communication, effective friends, and well-wishers, eventually there may be a solution. It may not be within the time scale of 7 days. It may not be also in the time scale of 3 years, but I believe both sides will eventually realize that they have no option but to look for a diplomatic solution.
Let's talk about France. The ambassador of France been urged to leave Niger as we speak.
Yes.
Let's talk about the French accord. Let's also add the angle to the recent death of Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Russian mercenary chief in all of this. Because only a couple of days ago he was seen in Mali.
That's good.
And there were talks about incursions coming into Niger.
Yes.
So now that Prigozhin is gone, what's the outlook like as regards Niger? And let's talk about France too in Niger.
So which one do you want us to start? Ask
France.
me the first question, then
France
I will give you
first.
the answers.
France.
Or I will try.
France.
France.
Oh, yes.
France has taken a correct political diplomatic position. They have not recognized the government sitting in Niger. We also in Nigeria have not recognized the government. So rightly the ambassador has refused to respond to the invitation of the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's the correct diplomatic interpretation. His government has not recognized the sitting government. They are still saying that the only government they recognize is that of President Bazoum. So that is the diplomatic interpretation. If there is a change, the ambassador must get instruction from his government. He cannot initiate dialogue with a government that his government has refused to recognize. The other option, of course, the other question you asked is Prigozhin, the Russian, what do you call him? The Russian...
Mercenary.
I wouldn't call him a mercenary.
Mercenary, yeah, mercenary chief.
Oh, all right.
Yevgeny Prigozhin.
The Russian mercenary, he has gone in, yes. I know a bit about Russia. I was ambassador there for 6.5 years in Moscow. I know the president personally, President Putin. I have met him, and I know the psychology or the mind of the Russians about the crisis in Ukraine. But Africa, particularly coming to Africa, the Russian leadership in the last few years has been trying to establish a strong foothold in Africa and West Africa, Central Africa in particular. In fact, they are now very active in my former state of Bangui, Central African Republic. I was there for 3 years too. I know the country. And the Wagner mercenaries have been there. They are trying to establish a foothold in Mali and Burkina Faso. There are a lot of stories. I still put them stories of their intention in Niger. But fortunately, President Putin has come out clearly to say that he will not encourage the support of military coup in Niger. He said so. I saw it there. He said in a public statement that Russia is not in support of the situation in Niger. And in fact, Russia also is trying to come closer to Africa. Only 2 weeks ago, there was a big Russian-African Summit Conference in St. Petersburg, to which a lot of African leaders, including our vice president, featured at the conference. So Russia has to take into account its interest on the whole continent, not its interest of the mercenary, or its interest in Mali, or its interest in Burkina Faso. So these are the areas where I said we could use all our diplomatic official communication. We can even send a special envoy to France, to Russia, to the United States, because America is also interested because of its military base in Niger, its fight against ISIS in West Sahel, in the Sahel region. So we could use all the diplomatic leverage that's available to ECOWAS to really bring about a final, quick diplomatic solution. It's not a problem of ECOWAS alone. It's beginning to be like a world problem. Russia is interested, China is interested, ECOWAS is interested. So let us find to join forces to bring pressure on the current leadership in Niamey to come up with a quick, acceptable solution to the ECOWAS leadership.
So let's also talk about an interesting aspect to all of this. China has been quiet.
Yes.
For what reason, probably, would you hazard?
China, what is it?
China's been quiet.
What's your question?
So China in all of this has been quiet. And if you look at it, China has major interest because China owns the Soraz refinery, about the biggest refinery in Niger. So they've got very big economic assets there. But they've been quiet in all of this. Is it that they've probably done their deal with the government?
No,
in Niger?
that is classic. That is classic diplomacy. They know that they have interest in Niger. They have interest also in not competing against ECOWAS. They have also interest not to come up against Russia. So the best option for them is to play their card very well. That's why I'm emphasizing the role of diplomacy and political solutions. We too in ECOWAS have to learn this art of whatever you are doing, bear also your interest. Only yesterday, our president met the Undersecretary of State, American Undersecretary of State for Africa, and he said all solutions on Niger must be found related to Nigerian national interest. That's exactly what the Chinese are playing. They are telling us that they are interested for a solution, but their interest at the moment is not to fight ECOWAS, not to fight China, not to fight Russia, and not to fight anybody, but allow the main interested parties to resolve it before they move in. And they will move in without any fallout. They have not been involved with the ECOWAS, they have not been involved with France, they have not been involved with the military government in Niger. So that is really classic diplomacy. Chinese are playing on this issue.
Let's talk about China, and let's talk about BRICS, and let's talk about South Africa. Real quickly. Only couple of years, BRICS came together only to think that China has not become a dominant force since joining the World Trade Organization in 2001. These countries have a sizable part of the world's GDP. And the vice president of Nigeria says, Nigeria did not officially apply to join, but they're taking Saudi Arabia with them, which only recently shut out supply out of the market, despite the fact that Joe Biden was trying to broker with the Americans. But the by the Americans brokering a deal with the Saudi Arabians, beg your pardon, but the Saudi Arabians wouldn't listen. Crude oil price still all-time high, and that's why America has to release from their strategic national reserves, and their strategic national reserves is going to an all-time low as we speak today. With all of this, Saudi Arabia coming to the fray, Egypt, which is another key state, coming to the fray, Nigeria is left out of the party. What do you think about this? Is this the new world order like Kissinger talked about?
I think, no, I can give you some insight. I'm not a member of the government, but I can give you some insight as a diplomat. First and foremost, the timing was really not very appropriate for Nigeria. At the time that the conference was taking place or was about to take, we don't even have a sitting government. The cabinet has not been formed. There is no foreign minister. There's never had a council of ministers meeting. The articulated foreign policy objectives have not yet been defined up to today. Up to today, the government is yet to be established. So it's not a one person. We have a president, we have a vice president, but what the vice president was emphasizing at the conference is that Nigeria has not applied, but in due course, Nigeria, I'm sure, will apply, in the sense that by then the government will have just taken a decision whether to apply or not. But at the moment, nobody even knows the thinking of the foreign minister or the thinking of our foreign policy or the timing. The government itself, government is a collective responsibility. It's not just the president and the vice president. You need the ministers. You need the advisors. You need the businessman. You need the technical people to run a country. So what the vice president is emphasizing is that the government is trying to settle. We have not applied because the government has just come in the last 4 weeks. Possibly when they settle down, I'm sure they will consider the options, pros and cons, whether Nigeria should join in or not. I'm not saying they should, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but at least let the government settle, let the government pronounce its foreign policy, articulate its national interest in terms of relations with the national states of other countries and international organizations before we can just jump in to join any economic, political, or association.
Okay,
that's all. It's only a question of time.
Let me hazard a couple of scenarios. Number one scenario will be, in a case where we join, we'll think of the Americans.
Yes.
And they'll look at us with a lot of distrust.
Yes.
What would you say as regard a scenario like that? There's another scenario that says Nigeria is supposed to be non-aligned. So why are we even thinking of this partnership? But some people will also argue as regards that by saying that even the group of countries that were non-aligned, they were associations of non-aligned countries. And prominent among those non-aligned countries, India is now aligned with BRICS.
Yes. Look, there is no country which is non-aligned in terms of its national interest. While the national interest is involved, Nigeria is not non-aligned. We have our own national interest. I know that at the moment there is an element of transition within the power blocks. You know, we started after the Second World War. We have the NATO or the Soviet Union and the Western democracies. After the breakdown of the Soviet Union in 1991, we had only what you call America as a superpower to the world. Since then, that arrangement has gradually been disengaged in terms of new forces. India, China, Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, and so many other countries are coming up to question the question of a monopolar world. They want a world of powers, influences. So the BRICS is seen as a bloc against the West. The West is also going through a lot of transition. Now, in the BRICS, you have India. Recently, 2 days ago, you have even Saudi Arabia. You have Iran now in the BRICS, or about to join at the end of the year. So the world is changing. I'm sure sooner or later, Nigeria must realize that it has to find its own focus within the context of its own national interest. I'm sure the incoming government or the sitting government or the new government must put its thinking cap, put a lot of thinking into whether to join. If you take your first option, that if you are seen as a member of BRICS, you are seen as anti-American. Saudi Arabia is there. India is there. India has very good relations with America. And so many other countries. If you are talking of not joining, then of course, if we refuse or if we do not agree to join, we'll have to assess our role as an active member of the international community. We can't totally commit ourselves to the West because we are not an industrialized country. We are a developing state. These countries are developing, and they are developing very rapidly. So we have a lot to learn from the BRICS group. The bottom line is, at the end of the day, the issue is purely political. Nigeria will have to decide within the context of its own national interest.
I mean, you said something recently. You said India is close with America. Is that true, or is just a marriage of some sort of convenience because India is a rising superpower itself? And what do you think of this, Kissinger America mindset? Funny enough, Henry Kissinger turned 100 recently, and this American dominance mindset, in the affairs of the world as we speak today. Briefly, as we wrap up.
You see, the trouble with foreign policy is changing within 24 hours. Foreign policy of any country changing within 24 hours. So you are now quoting Kissinger, who has been in the field over 40 years ago or 35 years ago. The reality on the world stage now is every country has to put a thinking cap to identify what is its national interest. Look at now, we're talking of Niger, ECOWAS. You cannot imagine a year ago that Niger would ask for French troops to move out or for uranium company operating in Niger to pull out. You cannot imagine that any French leader or any African leader under French territory will really challenge the authority of France in Africa. So the world is moving very fast. Communication now is global. Politics now is becoming even global too. So we pray that at the end of the day, all countries will identify their national interests and find a solution through their diplomatic activities within the international community.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Things will never be the same, and that's just the way it is. Changes, sort of like an American rapper saying that. Tupac. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you for your time. Thank you so much. It's been a good time talking to you, I must confess. I really appreciate you.